All right, good evening, my wonderful human beings. My name is the Human Advocate, and I advocate for humans. And today, I thought, I didn't really see much as far as commentary is concerned, but I thought we would take a look at, we'd continue a series I had kind of just left off from a while ago. I usually do live streams of it, but finding maybe my videos might do better. So, we're going to just take a look at a chapter of the Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, and we're just going to see how it, relates to being human. I would argue Benjamin Franklin is probably one of the most human beings to ever be a human being. He was a bit of a scoundrel, but he was also a Renaissance man, and he had his own way of doing things, and he bucked the system, but he was also part of the system, but he did it all. And so last we left off, I was on, I just finished chapter 12, so I'm just going to switch over to be chapter 13. I'm going to play a little music in the background. Hopefully it's not too overwhelming, but again, I appreciate you all. Once again, thank you all for following. You got me to 50 subscribers, and I can't thank you enough for helping to do that. I really appreciate it. I'm planning on having, like I said, my post, hopefully a live stream, so you guys, if you want to ask me questions, if you're interested at all in my background or anything like that, you can certainly ask, and I'll be happy to let you know about all that. So not a problem at all. But let me just play some music in the background here first. Hopefully it's not too overwhelming. I'll turn the mic up there, turn this down just a touch, and we'll just see how that goes. It's one of my favorite tracks right here. It's actually from DJ Shadow, and it's from an album called, very appropriately titled, What Does Your Soul Look Like? So think about that while listening in the background, and enjoy some ambiance. So let's just go into it. Full chapter, and then I'll stop it, and if there's something I want to touch on. Let's go. So, Chapter 13, Public Services and Duties. Peace being concluded, and the association business therefore at an end, I turned my thoughts again to the affair of establishing an academy. The first step I took was to associate in the design a number of active friends, of whom the Junto furnished a good part. The next was to write and publish a pamphlet entitled Proposals Relating to the Education of Youth in Pennsylvania. This I distributed among the principal inhabitants gratis, and as soon as I could suppose their minds a little prepared by the perusal of it, I set on foot a subscription for opening and supporting an academy. It was to be paid in quotas yearly for 5 years. By so dividing it, I judged the subscription might be larger, and I believe it was so, amounting to no less, if I remember right, than £5,000. In the introduction to those proposals, I stated their publication, not as an act of mine, but as some public-spirited gentleman, avoiding as much as I could, according to my usual rule, of presenting myself to the public as the author of any scheme for their benefit. The subscribers to carry the project into immediate execution chose out of their number 24 trustees, and appointed Mr. Francis, then Attorney General, and myself to draw up constitutions for the government of the academy, which, being done and signed, the house was hired, masters engaged, and the schools opened, I think in the same year of 1749. The scholars increasing fast, the house was soon found too small, and we were looking out for a piece of ground properly situated, with the intention to build, when Providence threw into our way, a large house, ready built, which was, with a few alterations, might well serve our purpose. This was the building before mentioned, erected by the heirs of Mr. Whitefield, and was obtained for us in the following manner. It is to be noted that the contributions to this building, being made by people of different sects, care was taken in the nomination of trustees, in whom the building and ground was to be vested, that a predominancy should not be given to any sect, lest in time that predominancy might be a means of appropriating the whole to the use of such sect, contrary to the original intention. It was therefore that one of each sect was appointed vis-a-vis, one Church of England man, one Presbyterian, one Baptist, and one Moravian. I am familiar with that because my ancestry was those in case of vacancy by death, or to fill in by election from among the contributors. The Moravian happened not to please his colleagues, and on his death they resolved to have no other of that sect. The difficulty then was how to avoid having two of some other sect by means of the new choice. Several persons were named, and for that reason not agreed to. At length one mentioned me, with the observation that I was merely an honest man, and of no sect at all, which prevailed with them to choose me. The enthusiasm which existed when the house was built had long since abated, and its trustees had not been able to procure fresh contributions for paying the ground rent and discharging some other debts. Let's see here. The building had occasion which embarrassed him greatly. Being now a member of both sets of trustees, for the building and that for the academy, I had a good opportunity of negotiating with both, and brought them finally to an agreement, by which the trustees for the building were ceded to those of the academy, the latter undertaking to discharge the debt and to keep forever in the building a large hall for occasion for preachers according to the original intention, and maintain a free school for the instruction of poor children. Very good, very good. Writings were accordingly drawn, and on paying the debts, the trustees of the academy were put into possession of the premises, and by dividing the great and lofty hall into stories and different rooms above and below for the several schools, and purchasing some additional ground, the whole was soon made fit for our purpose, and the scholars were moved into the building. The care and trouble of agreeing with the workmen, purchasing materials, and superintending the work fell upon me, and I went through it the more cheerfully, as it did not then interfere with my private business, having the year before taken a very able, industrious, and honest partner, Mr. David Hall, with whose character I was well acquainted. As he had worked for me for 4 years, he took off my hands all care of the printing office, paying me punctually my share of the profits. The partnership continued 18 years, successfully for us both. The trustees of the academy, after a while, were incorporated by a charter from the governor. Their funds were increased by contributions in Britain and grants of lands from the proprietaries, to which the Assembly has since made considerable addition, and thus was established the present University of Philadelphia. I have been continued one of its trustees, and from the beginning, now near 40 years, have had the very great pleasure of seeing a number of the youth who have received their education and distinguished by their improved abilities, serviceable in public stations and governments of their country. See, this is what Elon should be doing. If you want to be a man remembered by the people, if you want to be a man of America, an American spirit, American prowess and statute, you do these kinds of things. You do this public service that you contribute to the country. You don't just have a business. Benjamin Franklin had a business, which was a printing business. It was a newspaper business. But he also did all these things on his own. Like, he took his money, and he took his time, and he took his effort, and he went and he made a public school for the education of youth in Pennsylvania, the poor. And Elon could do that just as well as could any rich person on this earth if they wanted to, and especially within the United States. But if all you have to do is just dedicate your time and effort and energy towards pursuing your own business, anybody can do that. Anybody can just pursue their own business to their own benefit, to their own profit. But it takes a real person who knows what self-sacrifice is to, contribute to the American people. And that includes buying Twitter and turning it into X, by the way. That's still a profit venture. You're still making money off of it, or you hope to make money off of it in some way, or gain trust, or gain further, there's something to be said in that. But I'm not sure how much charity actually Elon does. Perhaps it is some, but if he was to start a school, or to start a college, or to start a university, of which, maybe they selected people of the United States to go and learn these skills and automatically upon graduation be trained in the way that Tesla needs, or SpaceX needs, or all that kind of stuff, if they were to prove themselves at a level without going through a testing process, that would go a long way to demonstrating the faithfulness that you have in the American people. And that, I would suggest to you and to anyone else that wants to be an American leader, to do those kinds of things. So, where was I? I have continued on one of its trustees, the beginning now 40 years, I've had the very great pleasure of seeing a number of the youth who have received their education and distinguished improved abilities. When I disengaged myself, as above mentioned, from private business, I flattered myself that, by the sufficient though moderate fortune I had acquired, I had secured leisure during the rest of my life for philosophical studies and amusements. See? Here, right here. This is the kind of thing. You made a moderate fortune, and then you're like, okay, I've made a sufficient amount of money. Now, how do I give back? How do I contribute to the formation of the rest of the country, of my countrymen, of my people? That is how you do this. This is how you do it correctly. I purchased all Dr. Spence's apparatus, who had come from England to lecture here, and I proceeded in my electrical experiments with great alacrity. But the public, now considering me a man of leisure, laid hold of me for their purposes. Every part of our civil government, and almost the same, imposing some duty upon me. The governor put me into the commission of the peace. The corporation of the city chose me of the common council. Now just a little more. And soon, after an alderman and the citizens at large chose me, a burgess, to represent them in assembly, this latter station was the more agreeable to me, as I was at length tired with sitting there to hear debates in which, as a clerk, I could take no part, and which were often so unentertaining that I was induced to amuse myself with the magic making squares and circles, or anything to avoid weariness. And I conceived my becoming a member would enlarge my power of doing good. Doing good. Becoming a member. See, you don't hear this kind of like talk today. You don't hear like, I want to become a member of a council and do good. It's not, it's always like, I have a profit business or charity or something I've made myself, and it's that kind of thing. I would not, however, insinuate that my ambition was not flattered by all those promotions. It certainly was, for considering my low beginning, there were great things to me, and they were still more pleasing, as being so many spontaneous testimonies of the public good opinion, and by me entirely unsolicited. The office justices of the peace I tried a little, by attending a few courts and sitting on the bench to hear causes, but finding that more knowledgeable of the common law that I possessed was necessary to act in that station with credit, I gradually withdrew from it, excusing myself by my being obliged to attend the higher duties of a legislator in the assembly. My election to this trust was repeated every year for 10 years, without my ever asking any elector for his vote, or signifying either directly or indirectly any desire of being chosen. On taking my seat in the House, my son was appointed their clerk. The year following, a treaty being held with the Indians at Carlisle, the governor sent a message to the House, proposing that they should nominate some of their members to be joined with some members of the Council of Commissioners for that purpose. The House named a speaker, Mr. Norris, and myself, and being commissioned, we went to Carlisle and met the Indians accordingly. As those people are extremely apt to get drunk, and when so, are very quarrelsome and disorderly, we strictly forbade the selling any liquor to them, and when they complained of this restriction, we told them that if they would continue sober during the treaty, we would give them plenty of rum when business was over. They promised this, and they kept their promise, because they could get no liquor, and the treaty was conducted very orderly, and concluded to mutual satisfaction. See, there's things like this that are just like, this kind of like, we have such revisionist history, where it's like, oh, we seduced the Native Americans here. No, look, we had a treaty in one instance here. We had a treaty, and they were wanting drink, and they wanted more drink, and we said, no, if you want to conduct this treaty appropriately, we should be sober for this treaty to be conducted appropriately. And after the treaty is signed, then you can have your drink, if that is what you so choose. That is the only way that we can do business, because Europeans would know that to conduct business while drunk would be a absolute terrible thing to do, because you could renege on your whole agreement that you had made, and you could just discount the whole thing, because drink makes you act differently than if you weren't. We understood this as coming over here And we said, we want to conduct business with you in a way that is conducive to us, and that we understand that is mutually beneficial for you. And we know what is not mutually beneficial for you is if you conduct business while you are drunk. This kind of thing right here, this is the rewriting of history. We see this all the time. And if you see things like this, you should tell people. Go back and read things like this from the founders. Go back and read things like this with people actually negotiated with Native Americans. It wasn't always just take what we want and leave them nothing. It was like, there were occasions, like, this whole black and whiteness of like, we were all evil and the Indians were all good. No. Never happened. Never happened. People, human beings, behave differently with different incentives, different times, for different reasons. And you discount your whole humanity when you ignore this kind of thing. Anyway, moving on. They then claimed to receive the rub. This was in the afternoon. They were near 100 men and children, and were lodged in temporary cabins built in the form of a square, just without the town in the evening. Hearing a great noise among them, the commissioners walked out to see what was the matter. They found they had a great bonfire in the middle of the square, that they were drunk, men and women quarreling and fighting, their dark-colored bodies half naked, seen only by the gloomy light of the bonfire, running after and beating one another with firebrands, accompanied by their horrid yellings, formed a scene the most resembling our ideas of hell that could well be imagined. There was no appeasing the tumult, and we retired to our lodging. At midnight, a number of them came thundering at our door, demanding more rum, of which we took no notice. There's an account for you. And why, if you're going to say, like, maybe we would lie about that, like, for what reason would Benjamin Franklin lie about this? With everything that he's written, with all the critiques and all the things that he's written about Englishmen and the crown and his exploration, his mind, the way it works, there's no reason for him to lie about this and put it in his autobiography, by the way. Like, if you're recounting your whole life, you're trying to recount it accurately. And there's no, I mean, he wants to put it in a good light for himself, sure. But I think with all that we know about the man, I mean, he did embellish, certainly, but there's no reason to put this in here, except to say that this was a part of his life that he is well aware of and remembers and would like people to know about. So, yeah. The next day, sensible they had misbehaved in giving us that disturbance, they sent 3 of their old counselors to make their apology. The orator acknowledged the fault, but laid it upon the rum. See?
Stop! Not good! What are you doing? You burned all the food, the shade, the rum!
Yes, the rum is gone.
Why is the rum gone?
1, because it is a vile drink that turns even the most respectable men into complete scoundrels. 2,
But why is the rum gone?
And then endeavored to excuse the rum by saying, the Great Spirit who made all things, made everything for some use, and whatever use he designed anything for, that use it should always be put to. Now, when he made rum, he said, let this be for the Indians to get drunk with. And it must be so. And indeed, if it be the design of Providence to extirpate these savages in order to make room for cultivators of the earth, it seems not improbable that rum may be the appointed means. It has already annihilated all the tribes who formerly inhabited the sea coast. Evening occurring, a great noise among them, the commissioners walked out to see what they did. So this is them reacting with the rum, obviously. In 1751, Dr. Thomas Bond, a particular friend of mine, conceived the idea of establishing a hospital in Philadelphia, a very beneficent design, which has been ascribed to me but was originally his, for the reception and the cure of poor sick persons, whether inhabitants of the province or strangers. He was zealous and active in endeavoring to procure subscriptions for it. But the proposal being a novelty in America, and at first not well understood, he met but with small success. At length, he came to me with the compliment he found there was no such thing as carrying a public-spirited project through without my being concerned in it. For, says he, I am often asked by those to whom I propose subscribing, have you consulted Franklin upon this business, and what does he think of it? And when I tell them I have not, supposing it rather out of your line, they do not subscribe, but say they will consider of it. I inquired into the nature and probable utility of this scheme, and receiving from him a very satisfactory explanation, I not only subscribed to it myself, but engaged heartily in the design of procuring subscriptions from others. Previously, however, to the solicitation, I endeavored to prepare the minds of the people by writing on the subject in the newspapers, which was my usual custom in such cases, but which he had omitted. The subscription afterward were more free and generous, but beginning to flag, I saw that would be insufficient without some assistance from the assembly, and therefore proposed a petition for it, which was done. The country members did not at first relish the project. They objected that it could only be serviceable to the city, and therefore the citizens alone should be at the expense of it. And they doubted whether the citizens themselves generally approved of it. My allegation, on the contrary, that it met with such approbation as to leave of no doubt of our being able to raise £2,000 by voluntary donations, they considered as a most extravagant supposition and utterly impossible. And here you go. Now he's about to tell us, I'm going to bet you, I haven't read any further, but he's going to tell us, these people thought it was impossible, and he did it. He did it. Even if they thought it was impossible, he went ahead and said, you know what? I think I can raise that money. I think I can make this work. I think I can. I think I can. A little train that couldn't. This is the American attitude. That's what this is. On this, I formed my plan, and asking leave to bring in a bill of incorporating the contributors according to the prayer of their petition, granting them a blank sum of money, which leave was obtained chiefly on the consideration that the House could throw the bill out if they did not like it. I drew it so as to make the important clause a condition 1 vis-a-vis, that it be enacted by the authority aforesaid, that when said contributors shall have met and chosen their managers and treasurers, shall have raised by their contributions a capital stock of value, the yearly interest of which is to be applied to the accommodating of the sick poor in the said hospital, free of charge for diet, attendance, advice, and medicines. Does an evil man do that? Does an evil man set out to free of charge something? Does that seem up their alley? And shall make the same appear to the satisfaction of the Speaker of the Assembly for the time being, and then it shall be, and it may be lawful for the said Speaker that he is hereby required to sign an order on the provincial treasurer for the payment of £2,000 in 2 yearly payments to the treasurer of the said hospital to be applied to founding, building, and finishing of the same. This condition carried the bill through for the members who had opposed the grant, and now conceived they might have the credit of being charitable without the expense, agreed to its passage, and then in soliciting subscriptions among the people, we urged the conditional promise of the law as an additional motive to give, since every man's donation would be doubled. Thus the clause worked both ways. The subscriptions accordingly soon exceeded the requisite sum, and we claimed to receive the public gift, which enabled us to carry the design into execution. A convenient and handsome building was soon erected. The institution has, by constant experience, been found useful and flourishes to this day, and I do not remember any of my political maneuvers, the success of which gave me, at the time, more pleasure, or wherein, thinking of it, I more easily excuse myself for having made some use of time. He made something that he knows he would not be able to see the dividends pay off further in his life, but would still be used even at the end of his life. He's still writing about it, like how it flourishes, how it continues to be of use to the community. It was about this time that another projector, the Reverend Gilbert Tennant, came to me with a request that I would assist him in procuring a subscription for erecting a new meeting house. It was to be the use of congregation he had gathered among the Presbyterians, who originally disciples of Mr. Whitfield, unwilling to make myself disagreeable to my fellow citizens, by too frequently soliciting their contributions. I absolutely refused, He then desired I would furnish him with a list of names of persons I knew by experience to be generous and public-spirited. I thought it would be unbecoming in me, after their kind compliance with my solicitations, to mark them out to be worried by other beggars, and therefore refused also to give such a list. He then desired I would at least give him my advice. That I will readily do, said I, and in the first place I advise you to apply to all those whom you know will not neglect those who you are sure will give nothing. And in some of them you may be mistaken. He laughed and thanked me, and said he would take my advice. He did so, for he asked of everybody, and obtained a much larger sum than he expected, for with which he erected the capacious and very elegant meeting house that stands in Arch Street. Our city, though laid upon a beautiful regularity, and the streets large and straight, crossing each other at right angles, had the disgrace of suffering those streets to remain long unpaved, and in wet weather the wheels of heavy carriages plowed them into the quagmire, so that it was difficult to cross them, and in dry weather the dust was offensive. I had lived near what was called Jersey Market, and saw the pain the inhabitants waiting in the mud while purchasing their provisions, a strip of ground down the middle of the market, which was length paved with brick, so that, being once in the market, they had firm footing, but were often over shoes and dirt to get there. By talking, and writing on the subject, I was at length instrumental in getting the street paved with stone between the market and the brick-footed pavement that was on each side of the houses. This, for some time, gave an easy access to the market dry shod, but the rest of the street not being paved, whenever a carriage came out of the mud upon the pavement, it shook off and left its dirt upon it. And it was soon covered with mire, with which was not removed, the city yet having no scavengers. After some inquiry, I found a poor industrious man who was willing to undertake keeping the pavement clean by sweeping it twice a week, carrying off the dirt from before all the neighbors' doors, and for the sum of 6 pence per month to be paid by each house. I then wrote and printed a paper setting forth the advantages of the neighborhood that might be obtained by this small expense. The greater ease in keeping our houses clean, so much dirt not being brought in by people's feet, the benefit to the shops by more custom, as buyers could more easily get at them, and by not having in windy weather the dust floated in upon their goods. I sent one of these papers to each house, and in a day or two went round to see who would subscribe an agreement to pay those 6 pences. It was unanimously signed, and for a time well executed. All the inhabitants of the city were delighted with the cleanliness of the pavement that surrounded that market, it being a convenience to all, and this raised a general desire to have all the streets paved, and made the people more willing to submit to a tax for that purpose. After some time, I drew a bill for paving the city, and brought it into the assembly. It was just before I went to England in 1757, and did not pass till I was gone. And then, with an alteration in the mode of assessment, which I thought not for the better, but with an additional provision for the lighting as well as paving the streets, which was a great improvement. It was by a private person, the late Mr. John Clifton, his giving a sample of the utility of lamps, by placing one at his door, and the people first impressed with the idea of lightening all the city. The honor of the public benefits as so much ascribed to me, but it belongs truly to that gentleman. I did not follow his example, and have only some merit to claim respecting the form of our lamps, as differing from the globe lamps that were supplied from London. Those who found it convenient in those respects admitted to no air below. The smoke, therefore, not readily go out above, but circulated in the globe lodged on its inside, and soon obstructed light they were intended to afford, giving besides the daily trouble of wiping them clean. An accidental stroke on one of them would demolish it, and render it totally useless. I therefore suggested the composing them of 4 flat panes, with a long funnel above to draw up the smoke and crevices admitting air below, to facilitate the ascent of the smoke, and by this means they were kept clean, and did not grow dark in a few hours as the London lamps do, but continued bright till morning, and an accidental stroke would generally break but a single pane easily repaired. I sometimes wondered that Londoners did not, from the effect holes in the bottom of the globe lamps, thus at Vauxhall, have in keeping them clean, learn to have such holes in every lamps. Goodness, a lot about lamps here. But these holes being made for other purposes, to communicate flame more suddenly to the wick by the little flax hanging down. How much detail? Look how much detail this is. To the other use of letting in air seems to not have been thought of, and therefore after the lamps have been lit a few hours, the streets of London are very poorly illuminated. The mention of these improvements puts me in the mind of one I proposed when in London, Dr. Fothergill, who was among the best men I have known, and a great promoter of useful projects. I had observed that the streets, when dry, were never swept, and the light dust carried away, but it was suffered to accumulate till wet weather reduced it to mud, and then after lying some days so deep on the pavement that there were no crossing but in the paths, kept clean by poor people with brooms. It was with great labor raked together and thrown up into carts open above, the sides of which suffered some of the slush at every jolt on the pavement to shake out and fall, sometimes to the annoyance of foot passengers. The reason given for not sweeping the dusty streets was that the dust would fly into the windows and shops and houses. Someone's sweeping there. How much do we have listed this chapter? Okay, not much. An accidental occurrence had instructed me how much sweeping might be done in little time. I found at my door Craven Street. One morning a poor woman sweeping on my pavement with a birch broom. She appeared, very pale and feeble, as just come out of a fit of sickness. I asked who employed her to sweep there. She said, "Nobody, but I am very poor and in distress, and I sweeps before gentle folks' doors, and hopes they will give me something. And her sweep the whole street clean, and I would give her a shilling. This was 9 o'clock. At 12, she came for a shilling. From the slowness I saw at first in her working, I could scarce believe that the work was done so soon, and sent my servant to examine it, who reported that the whole street was swept perfectly clean, and all the dusted placked in the gutter, which was in the middle, and the next rain washed it quite away, so that the pavement and even the kennel were perfectly clean. I then judged that if the feeble woman could sweep such in a street in 3 hours, a strong, active man might have done it in half the time. A little sexist there, Mr. Franklin. And here, let me remark that the convenience of having but one gutter in such a narrow street, running down the middle instead of two, one on each side near the footway, for where all the rain and falls in the street and meets in the middle, and forms a current strong enough to wash the mud away. So he's talking about how, he could do this more efficiently. Which is rendered, I'm going to just kind of push through this a little bit. It's a little in the weeds. For the more effectual cleaning and keeping the streets clean of London, Westminster, it is proposed that several watchmen be contracted with the have and the dust of the dry seasons, and mud raked up at other times, in the several street lanes of this round, that they be furnished with brooms and other proper instruments for these purposes, to be kept at their respective hands, ready to furnish the poor people that they might employ in the service, that in the dry summer months the dust be all swept into heaps at proper distances, before the shops and windows of houses are usually opened. Then the scavengers with close-covered carts shall also carry it all away. Let the mud, when raked up, not be left in heaps and spread with the horses and the scavengers and thrown into carts. Bodies of carts be placed at convenient distances. Okay, I have seen the doubts, practicality of the latter of this proposal, account of narrowness of some streets and difficulty of placing the draining sleds. So much passage. But I'm still of the opinion that the former, requiring the dust to be swept up and carried away before the shops are open, is very practicable in the summer when the days are long. For in walking through the Strand and Fleet Street one morning at 7 o'clock, I observed there is not one shop open, though it had been daylight and sun up the 3 hours. This is all very, very detailed. Some may think these trifling matters not worth minding or relating. See, Franklin's aware. He's like, I realize I'm rambling a bit, and you guys might be bored to frickin' tears, but hear me out. But when they consider that though dust blown into the eyes of a single person, or into a single shop on a windy day, is that of small importance, yet the great numbers of the instances in a populous city and its frequent repetitions give it weight and consequence. Perhaps they will not censure very severely those who bestow some attention to affairs of this seemingly low nature. Human felicity is produced not so much by great pieces of good fortune that seldom happen as by little advantages that occur every day. Thus, if you teach a poor young man to shave himself and keep his razor in order, you may contribute more to the happiness of his life. More to the happiness of his life than in giving him 1,000 guineas. Wow! Wow! Do you see this? Look at this! Look at this! This is brilliant! He's obviously talking about slavery here. Someone from Guinea. If you gave a man 1,000 guineas, are they going to be happy? Rather than, if you may contribute more to his life, if you to teach a poor young man to shave himself and keep his razor in order, you may contribute more to the happiness of his life than by giving him 1,000 slaves. Novel idea to teach someone to do something, to behave on their own, to make their way in the world, to get them settled, to get them sorted, to get them on the path to goodness and happiness and success by investing in the people that come after you. The money may be soon spent, the regret only remaining of having foolishly consumed it. But the other case, he escapes the frequent vexation of waiting for barbers and of their sometimes dirty fingers, offensive breaths, and dull razors. This is all about self-sufficiency right here. All about it. Slavery is nothing self-sufficient. There is nothing self-sufficient in slavery. You do not sustain yourself through slavery. You do not sustain yourself by giving yourself 1,000 guineas, as Franklin says here. He shaves when the most convenient to him, when it is on his schedule, on his time, on his ability, and enjoys the daily pleasure of its being done with a good instrument. With these sentiments, I have hazarded the few preceding pages, hoping they may afford hints which sometime or other may be useful to a city I love. Having lived many years in it, very happily, and perhaps to some of our own towns in America. No one talks like that. No one talks like that. This is the kind of hope. This is the kind of, like, I don't want to cry. I'm not going to cry, but this is the stuff, like, right here. This is the stuff that America is made of. This is the stuff of making people successful and happy and fulfilled. This, not importation of guineas. Having been for some time employed by the Postmaster General of America as his comptroller in regulating several offices and bringing the officers to the account, I was upon his death in 1753 appointed, jointly with Mr. William Hunter, to succeed him by a commission from the Postmaster General in England. The American office never had hitherto paid anything to that of Britain. We were to have £600 a year between us. If we could make that sum out of the profits of the office, to do this, a variety of improvements were necessary. Some of these were inevitably at first expensive, so that in the first 4 years, the office became above £900 in debt to us. But it soon after began to repay us, and before I was displaced by a freak of the ministers, of which I shall speak hereafter, we had brought it to yield 3 times as much clear revenue to the crown as the post office of Ireland. Since the imprudent transaction they have received from it, not 1 farthing. The business of the Post Office occasioned my taking a journey this year to New England, where the College of Cambridge, of their own motion, presented to me with the degree of Master of Arts. Yale College in Connecticut had before made me similar compliment. Thus, without studying in any college, I came to partake of their honors. They were conferred in the consideration of my improvements and discoveries in the electric branch of natural philosophy. See, this is, long-windedness. Benjamin Franklin, very long-winded, took a long time to explain, but landed that plane very well in this last paragraph. Very well said. This is what America is about. It is about training, investing, and contributing to those who will come after, and continue, and to continue. And that is what the 60s and the whole modus operandi of the hippie movement has taken away from future generations, because they thought that they had figured it out, like they could just conquer humanity as it's always been done in America for the past 100 and 200 years. But I can't really blame them, because there were so many influences, being intelligence and foreign influences and communism and all the other things that were present then, and of course are now becoming apparent to the people here, that this is what is necessary to make America America. This is what leads to dissatisfaction. That is all. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this reading. I hope you stuck around long enough, stood around long enough to enjoy this and get the summary and enjoy the rest of your time today. I appreciate you tuning in and watching, and be on the lookout for a a live stream of which I will sit and answer a couple of questions. And thank you to one of my commenters who told me that they found me through one of my readings. I really appreciate that. It really inspired me to kind of get back and do this a little more, because there is something to be said of how they talked in this day and age and how it relates to today. We cannot continue forward without knowing where we came from. And this, even all this, is it. Anyway, thank you for staying and sticking with me. And I am the Human Advocate. I advocate for humans. And remember to stay human. Thank you. Have a good day, night, and I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.